Hello, my name is Morgan Reeves, and today I'll be talking to you about my assigned pioneer in the field of psychology, B.F. Skinner, and his theory of learning, which is operant conditioning. So, let's start from the beginning. So, in B.F. Skinner's early life, his full name is Burrus Frederick Skinner, and he was born on March 20th of 1904 in a small town in Pennsylvania called Squishcona, which is where he also grew up. His father was a lawyer, and his mother stayed at home to care for Skinner and his younger brother. From a young age, Skinner was interested in making different gadgets and machines. Some examples that I wanted to include in here are he spent much of his childhood building things like a cart that could steer backwards and a machine that could keep going and going. He also worked with his friends to create things such as a cabin in the woods, which I thought was really remarkable for such a young kid. He also was a businessman. He also had an eye for business, where one example of him being in business was he sold elderberries door to door, and he devised a way for ripe and unripe berries to float to the top, so they seemed more appealing to his buyers. During high school, he worked at a shoe store and made a machine to spread the green dust, which was probably floor cleaner, much like what we have at the school with the pine chips when someone has an accident or a spill, that help the broom pick up the dirt. Also pictured on the side, I wanted to provide some examples and pictures from Skinner's early life. This is him as a young boy, and this is a picture of his father and his mother. So early professional and personal life continued. So now we move on to his life and education early on. So at first, Skinner attended Hamilton College in New York for his education, where he intended on pursuing a career as a novelist, and he majored in English. After he couldn't finish his first book, he went on to graduate at Harvard University and got his first PhD degree in psychology in 1931. One thing that I found very interesting about B.F. Skinner was that he intended on being a writer before he was a psychologist. From his personal life that we talked about previously, you could see that he was very interested in building things, creating things to solve problems. And he found that interest in writing later on when he was in high school. And he was actually inspired to go to college to be a novelist by his English teacher in high school. The only thing that stopped him from being a writer was he just did not have that passion anymore once he got there. Much like when people go to college and they think they know what they want to do, and they decide that they have a different career path in store for them. And aren't we so thankful that B.F. Skinner changed his mind and wanted to get his PhD in psychology because he has contributed so much to the field. Included in this slide is a picture of his graduating class when he was a freshman at Harvard. He's right here, right up front. And this is a picture of the Hamilton College in New York, where he first attended to pursue his degree in English. After going to college and he had grown up a little bit more, he also was a father and a husband. So in 1936, at the age of 32, Skinner married Yvonne Blue and moved to Minnesota, where Skinner had his first teaching job at the University of Minnesota. Busy with his family and teaching, he had a daughter named Julie that was born in 1939, or 38, excuse me. And in 1943, Yvonne found out she was pregnant with her daughter, Deborah. So what's so amazing about the birth of Deborah is that after her birth, Yvonne really was wanting to have her husband create a crib that was safe, and even more safe than the ones found on the market. Much like mothers, they just want the best and the safest option for their children. And that's what Yvonne wanted. Skinner, being the good father that he was, created an invention as an enclosed and heated crib with plexiglass windows called the baby tender, but we know it today as the baby box. So if it were not for his daughter Deborah being born, we would not got to see that invention probably. So Pictured over here is a picture of Skinner and Yvonne early in their marriage, and over here above is his daughters Julie and Deborah pictured with his wife Yvonne. So, professional and personal life in terms of career and his employment. So, from 1936 to 1945, Skinner lectured, conducted research, and wrote articles at the University of Minnesota. He also wrote the article, The Behavior of Organisms, in 1938, where he details his experiments with rats, which laid the groundwork for ideas for operant conditioning. And in 1949, he wrote the novel Walden 2, and he attempted to apply these ideals that he had discovered that laid the groundwork for the theory of operant conditioning to the outer world by describing a utopian society that was based around his ideals that he would later use to form his theory of learning. From 1945 to 1948, he served as a professor and chairman at the Department of Psychology at Indiana University before accepting his position at Harvard University. During his time at Harvard, he conducted productive research, provided effective instruction, worked on teaching machines and program training, and authored numerous articles and books. He also retired from his position in the career of psychology in 1974. So he contributed a lot and did a lot to educate young minds about psychology. So his theory of development. Skinner's most notable discoveries in the field of psychology include his claim to fame, operant conditioning, the notion of schedules of reinforcement. So that just shows us that if we schedule how we reinforce certain behaviors, or we want to make behaviors disappear, that we can schedule those. We don't do those randomly for it to be effective. He also introduced a response rate as a dependent variable in research. That's very important because response rates tells us if a stimulus or strategy is working, and that can be applied to teaching as well, because if we get a response in a timely manner, we know our teaching methods are effective. And if we don't have a response time in a certain amount of time, we know that we need to try something different. He also proposed that emotions could be translated into a person's predispositions to act in specific ways. So if someone experiences anger towards someone else, they're more likely to yell or act out against them because of that preconceived experience. So his claim to fame and his most notable contribution to the field of psychology is operant conditioning. He studied operant conditioning by conducting experiments using animals, which he placed in the Skinner box, which was like Thorndike's puzzle box. The box involved placing animals such as rats or pigeons into a sealed box and with a lever that would provide food. So, who was he influenced by? Skinner was influenced by John B. Watson, his philosophy in psychology called behaviorism. Behaviorism is the theory that humans or animal behavior can be explained in terms of conditioning without the appeal of thoughts or feelings. He was interested in how environmental experiences and learning cause certain behaviors to change. As a result, he developed operant conditioning pigeon chamber and other devices to conduct experiments involving operant conditioning. So, Skinner's later life. In his later years, he was still involved in the field of psychology and took chronicling his life and research in a series of autobiographies to document his life and what led him to developing operant conditioning and his research associated with it. He also continued to be active in the field of psychology. But unfortunately, in 1989, Skinner was diagnosed with leukemia, and a year later, he lost his battle against the disease, passing away in his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts on August 18, 1990. So, we've discussed what he did and how he formed it, but we've never truly defined operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is the process of learning through reinforcement and punishment, and behaviors are either strengthened or weakened based on a consequence of that behavior. He studied that with this image over here. the Skinner box, as you can see, there's a rat, and he had lights and a speaker, and also electric waves that would shock the rat if he was not supposed to touch the lever for food on the schedule. And if he was given the green light to press the lever. So through this experiment right here with rats and pigeons, he was able to study scheduling, response rates, and how to condition these rats to know red means no and green means go, just like through touching the lever to release food. So, what were his impacts on teaching practices? Well, there were tons. His educational contributions were used for shaping behaviors, eliminating negative behaviors, reinforcing behaviors to either occur or disappear. Operant conditioning can be used to motivate learners if we know what they like and that we know what they'll work for, such as I teach 3rd grade. My kids really are motivated by free time outside or on the computer. And I tell them if we work hard and get finished early, we'll get some free time. That motivates them. That conditions them to know if I work hard, then I get this. So it also helps teachers learn about learners. Like I just mentioned, it tells us what motivates our learners, what's working to condition them to be successful, and what's not conditioning them to be successful. So we can, as educators, come up with a plan to make them successful. And it encourages feedback. Teachers can receive feedback from learners so they acknowledge whether or not their teaching methods are effective or not. I use that in my classroom all the time because I tell my students, I want to know what I'm doing wrong in order to do better for them. And here are my references. As you can tell, Skinner contributed to the field of psychology in a great amount and also influenced how we teach children and how we can motivate them to be better learners. Thank you.